Hello, dear students. Today I'm going to explain the new play we have, which is Trifles by Susan Glaspell, an American playwright who lived in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And she was a feminist writer, and I think you know what feminist means, which means she's always supporting the rights of women and their role in the society. And at the time, at the beginning of the 20th century, and at the very beginning, America is not like now. So women were always undervalued and their rights were ignored. So she's among the first who called for equality between men and women, the two genders, and more rights for women, whether in work or in life or in marriage or any area. I'm not gonna talk about her life here as in this PowerPoint because it's not important. Yani, I was thinking maybe if I would give you a lecture, see you, then maybe that would be a good way. But since there's no lecture and I'm just gonna do um, online videos, then maybe I should focus on the important points. Um, Let me start with the first thing, which is Trifles, the title of the play. Trifles means silly things, not important things, things that are insignificant. You call it trifles, and it's very, very important title. We'll explain the play later on, and you will come to know what is the importance of this title because um, in this play, the two, or there are actually three men in this play, they think what women do in their daily life. Of course, this is the beginning of the 20th century, and women were not working. And maybe there are some teachers, but apart from that, some factories maybe, but most of them are housewives and they have domestic duties like cleaning the house and taking care of the children, cooking, uh, these things. We knitting and doing something like knitting a blanket or clothes for the family. These are the things they think this is what women always think about. And for them, for men, they think these are trifles, insignificant things compared to what men do in work. We have one of the characters as a sheriff of the town, another is a lawyer, so attorneys, so they are having important things to do, and women just have any insignificant duties. But later on, you see how these insignificant things women do, like knitting. You know what the meaning of knitting? Knitting, making a blanket, weaving a blanket by some wool things or pieces of well pieces of clothes, whatever is left in the house. Old women, the old generation, used to collect these pieces of clothes and stitch them together to make a blanket or something to sit on, something useful in the house. So these things which are seen by men in the play as insignificant and they're just silly things in the house, they will lead to important conclusion about a murder case in this play. There's a murder case, somebody is killed. And these simple things which men think are trivial and insignificant are actually clues, evidence to the murder in this play. So this is where the title comes from. Right, it is a one act play, so it's one act, right? And it's performed by Provincetown players at the Wharf Theatre. This is not important, but just to know that it's just one act play. It's a short play. The play Trifles takes place somewhere in America. It's called Midwest, somewhere in America, in one of the cities. It's actually not a city; it's a countryside, a house. in a countryside, and it's very important to know at the beginning because this house is isolated. It's not part of a town life where there are some neighbors around them, but they are also somehow far away. Yeah, I mean, you need to take a wagon to go there, araba, not by walking. So it's an isolated, cold place, which is very, very important to understand from the beginning, because this isolation is what makes the wife, the main character in this play, feel depressed and eventually kills her husband. Um, but there are other reasons, of course. We'll come to explain them. But this isolation and this cold and snow and living with a husband who is harsh and cruel and not warm, not he doesn't have feeling, he doesn't care about her. All those things that could press on a woman to act against her nature. If she is nice and lovely, she would turn to be cruel, and she will have depression, and she will have um so certain uneasy feelings. So the event happened in a small house, country house, in a cold place. And basically, it's a place, so you just see the kitchen, and the kitchen is dirty. And this is the house of Mr. Wright and Mrs. Minnie Wright, his wife. So Mrs. Minnie Wright, the wife, and Mr. Wright, John Wright, the husband. John Wright, the husband, is killed, and there are the sheriff of the town and the lawyer attorney and the neighbor and the wife of the sheriff and the wife of the neighbor join them to come to the house because the sheriff is investigating this murder case. What happened? Who can be the murderer? If there are thieves or somebody that the husband had some problem with, and there are some problems and revenge story maybe. So they are investigating. They don't know who, but suspect number one is the wife, and she was taken to prison because she's the only one who was with her husband the night he was killed. And we don't see Mrs. Minnie Wright throughout the whole play. She never appears. She's in the prison and people talk about her, but we never see her. She never appears on the stage. So this is important also to understand early in the play that the main character, protagonist, Mrs. Minnie Wright, the wife, never appears on the stage. Never. There's no scene where she's in a prison and we see her. We don't see her. We just see those five characters: the sheriff, the attorney, the lawyer, and a neighbor, and the wife of the sheriff and the wife of the neighbor. Those are the only characters we see, and they would talk about Miss Minnie Wright. They would talk about Mr. John Wright, and we come to know many things about it. So the characters are George Henderson, who was the attorney, the lawyer, Henry Peters, who's the sheriff, Louis Hale, who's the neighbor, and the wife of the sheriff, Mrs. Peters, and the wife of the neighbor, Mrs. Hale. Okay, the sheriff, the attorney, and a neighbor came to the house to investigate the death of Mr. John Wright, who was strangled in his sleep. Strangled means he was somebody put his hand on his neck and press until he kills John Wright. So this is the meaning of strangle. And before we start going on in the play, I would like you to pay attention to the choice of the names. John Wright. Wright means something good. Right. So is he really a good husband? Is the name right, which means right, something good, something correct, is really referring to a person who's really right and correct and everything is good with him? And the name of the wife who was accused of killing her husband, Minnie. Minnie means small. For example, sometimes it's a mini book, a mini car, a mini whatever, means a small, small. So Minnie means a small, and that means insignificant. She's insignificant, Minnie. And you will see later on that the two ladies, Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters, they would speak about her as Minnie Foster, using the father name of the, when a woman gets married, this is in the West countries, she takes the name of her husband's. So she will be called Minnie Wright, takes the family name of the husband. But those two ladies do not refer to her as Mrs. Minnie Wright, but they call her Mrs. Minnie Foster, referring to her father. Why? Because they want to bring the old Gail Minnie Foster when she was with her father. Those were the good days. That's where she feels really nice and good. The girl was singing in the church and she loves life and she has a beautiful voice and she likes colorful dress and she was happy and she was talking. And then that's before she gets married. But after she gets married, gradually over 30 years of marriage, having no children, living in isolated life, living with a cruel, harsh husband who sometimes beats her, she feels she is more like a dead person inside, no more alive. She doesn't sing, she doesn't even wear nicer clothes because her husband was not giving her money to buy clothes. Now, her husband is not poor. Now he's a farmer. He farms lands, and even men. Mr. Hale, who's the neighbor, he says he's a good man because he doesn't drink alcohol and he never borrows money. So he's not the kind who borrows money and he just immerses himself in debts and doesn't care about money. So he says he's a good man if he does not drink, if he does not borrow money, he can buy his own food, buy his own thing. So he's a good man. So, but is this enough that he doesn't drink and he doesn't borrow money from others because he can, work and get money from his own farm? Is this enough to make the husband a good husband? So that's a question we can ask throughout this play. But we could clearly see that when the two women, Mrs. Peters and Mrs. Hale, speak about Minnie, they refer to her as a Minnie Foster. They want to indicate, they want to refer to the old Minnie when she was happy and youthful and joyful and she was active. And after years, she became like dead inside. Well, Mrs. Hale, who's the neighbor, she said sometimes I feel guilty about that because I think I should have visited her. I should have talked to her. I should have, take care of her because she's alone and she feels lonely. So women here feels that they have to support each other if they see one of them is in a difficult marriage situation. And that's one of the ideas in this play. Okay, let's go back to the play and read it through it and understand more about it. So John Wright was strangled in bed. So he was asleep, and somebody put his hands around his neck and press until he kills John Wright. Who is this person? So the sheriff and the attorney came to investigate, see if they can find evidence, if they can find anything about a thief maybe, or about what. But of course, the wife is taken to prison because she's the only one who was with her husband the night he was strangled, and she is suspect number one. But of course, they need to find evidence against her in order to condemn her, and there are no evidence until now. Right, the wives of the men accompany them to investigate the events for themselves as the group inspect the house, the tiny details or trifles paint a picture of what has happened. So the sheriff, the attorney, and Hale, Mr. Hale, the neighbor, they go upstairs to the bedroom where John Wright was found dead. trying to see if they can find any evidence of some, if there is a broken window, so somebody came from outside, if they have a rope, somebody climbs to the room and kills that person, if they find anything that is relevant to the murder case. But the two women, Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters, stays in the kitchen. And it's in the kitchen where they can find all the details that are relevant to the murder. So while men think that in the bedroom they would find evidence about the murder, while the kitchen has insignificant trifle things and cooking dishes and what else, but actually there where the two women are going to find more and more details, not only about the murder, but also about the married life of the couple. So scene one, the kitchen is the now abandoned farmhouse of John Wright, a gloomy kitchen, and left without having been put in order. Unwashed pans under the sink, a loaf of bread outside the bread box, a dish towel on the table, other signs of incompleted work. At the rear, the outer door opens and the sheriff comes in, followed by the county. You can see this description of the kitchen, but normally, because Minnie Wright is living alone, she has no children, and she's a country girl, so normally the kitchen will be super clean, super nice and tidy. Everything's clean, everything's tidy, everything in order. Why the kitchen here is dirty and the dishes are left unwashed and everything is just not clean? This is something men think, just kitchen dishes. But for women who think that number one duty for a woman is to clean her kitchen, they will see that when Minnie neglects her kitchen means her life is neglected, means her emotion is neglected, her feeling is neglected, means that she is no more normal person, that she would be happy to wash and clean the house. She has no goal in this marriage life. It is dead married life. So that's all what it means to have a dirty, gloomy kitchen. Attorney and Hale and Sheriff Hale are men in middle life. Sorry, there must be Peters here instead of the second Hale. You know, Attorney and Hale, Attorney Peters should be. The country attorney is a young man, so there are three men: the sheriff, the lawyer, Mr. Peters, and the neighbor, Mr. Hale. All are much bundled up and go at once to the stove. So they went to the fire stove because it's very cold. They are followed by the two women, the sheriff's wife first. She's a slightly weary woman, a thin, nervous face, and Mrs. Hale, a larger and would ordinarily be called more comfortably looking, but she is disturbed now and looks fearful about as she enters. The women have come in slowly and stand close together near the door. So the men came at the beginning and followed by the women, the wife of the sheriff and the wife of the neighbor. So that's a picture of a dirty kitchen, neglected, meaning the woman, Minnie Foster, has no more any meaning in her life, that she can go even to kill her husband to finish this empty, cold, harsh life. Right. Now the county attorney, the lawyer, rubbing his hand because very cold. This feels good. So they have the fire on the stove and they are warming themselves, and he's calling the women, come up to the fire, ladies. Miss Peters, the wife of the sheriff, I am not cold. So they stood there. They did not feel they should go to the fireplace. And the sheriff, unbuttoning his overcoat and stepping away from the stove as if to mark the beginning of official business. Now, Mr. Hale, before we move things about, you explain to Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson is the attorney. The lawyer, what you saw when you come here yesterday morning. So he's asking, the sheriff is asking the neighbor, Mr. Hale, because Mr. Hale came in the morning, the day before, to speak with Mr. John Wright, and then he sees Minnie Wright, the wife, sitting in the kitchen. And he asked her, can I speak to Mr. John Wright, your husband? And the wife says, no, he is dead. So Mr. Hale is the first one to come upstairs and see John Wright dead. So the sheriff is asking Mr. Hale to give details what happened when he comes into the house. So the county attorney, by the way, has anything been moved? Are things just as they left them yesterday? The sheriff, it is just the same when it dropped below zero last night. I thought I would better send Frank out this morning to make a fire for us, not use getting pneumonia with a big case on. But I told him not to touch anything except the stove, and you know, Frank. So now Hale, the neighbor, is going to tell the sheriff and the lawyer what happened when he walks into the house yesterday and sees the whole event. He says she was rocking back and forth. So this is, he's speaking about Mrs. Minnie Foster or Mrs. Minnie Wright. She was sitting on this rocking chair and rocking it, moving it back and forth. She had her apron in her hand, the apron the women dress when they want to cook. She was holding it in his hand and was kind of pleating it, was kind of tying it, pleating it. So it's a sign of nervousness. A sign when somebody is nervous, he does these things. Somebody is stressed. So the county attorney, and how did she look? Well, she looked queer. Queer means strange. How do you mean queer? What do you mean by the word she looks strange? How did she seem to feel about your coming? Hale, why, I don't think she minded one way or another. She didn't pay much attention. I said, how do you, Mrs. Wright? It's cold, ain't it? And she said, it is. And went on kind of pleating her apron, meaning tiding her apron, just twisting her apron. Well, I was surprised she didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down, but just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, I want to see John. And then she laughed. I guess you would call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, can't I see John? No, she said. She says, kind of dull like. Ain't he home? Says I. Yes, says she. He's home. Then why can't I see him? I asked her out of patience. 'Cause he is dead, said she. Dead, said I. She just nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back. So she was sitting there in the morning, and this neighbor came to see John Wright, and he asked the wife, can I see your husband? She says, no, you can't. He says, why? Is he not at home? She says, no, he's at home, but she cannot see him. And the neighbor was finding it very strange. Why? She says, because he's dead. And he was shocked. Dead? And she was just, moving the chair back and forth. Very clear that this woman is not normal. Her psychology is not normal. Of course, she's a nice woman, lovely. But during these 30 years of living with a cold, harsh husband who insults her, who beats her, she has changed. And now, out of depression and out of, you know, repression, she killed her husband. But she's not saying this to anyone. She keeps quiet. But her attitude shows very clear that she is not a normal person. So what happened after that? He says, "Why? Where is he?" Says I, not knowing what to say. She just pointed upstairs, like that. I got up with the idea of going up there. I walked from there to here. Then I say, "Why? What did he die of?" "He died," she said, this is the woman, "of a rope round his neck." So somebody put a rope around his neck and it twisted his neck, prevent him from breathing, says she. And just went on bleating, as we said, twisting her apron out of feeling of nervous and feeling of um, passion and melancholy, sadness. Well, I went out and called Harry. I thought I might need help, and we went upstairs, and there was he laying. So he went outside, he called his friend, and they went upstairs, and they found Mr. John Wright laying there with his neck twisted by a rope. So that's what happened to him. Um, well, my first thought was to get that rope off. So he said maybe I should take off that rope around the neck of Mr. John. It looked, but Harry, he went up to him and he said, "No, he's dead, all right. No, we better not touch anything." So we went back downstairs. She was still the same way. "Has anybody been notified?" I asked. "No," says she, unconcerned. "Who did this, Mrs. Wright? Who did this?" said Harry. He said, businesslike, and she stopped bleating of her apron. "I don't know." So Minnie Wright, when Harry asked the wife, "Who did this? Who strangled your husband?" She said, "I don't know." "You don't know?" says Harry. "No," says she. "Weren't you sleeping in the bed with him?" says Harry. "Yes," said she. "But I was on the inside. Somebody slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him, and you didn't wake up," says Harry. "I didn't wake up," said she. She said after him, "We must looked as if we didn't see how that could be." For after a minute she said, "I sleep sound." Harry was going to ask her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell her story first to the coroner or the sheriff. So Harry went fast as he could to reverse the place where there is a telephone. So he says, "We asked the wife, who did this?" She said, "I don't know." Then we said, "But you were sleeping in the same bedroom." She said, "Well, I sleep very deep. It means I can't wake up if some sound is near me. Some people are deep sleepers. They don't wake up if something happens around them." So that's what she said. So here says Minnie, right, she didn't say I did it. She said, "I don't know who did it." So that's also something you can think about it. Why she didn't confess about the murder. She is intentionally killing and hiding, and is she so smart? Or is things happening just because we human beings, when we feel death is coming, we just want to survive? It's natural instinct. We don't want to get into, we don't want to, go for to death. So that's what the neighbor, Mr. Hale, says when, how he discovers that John Wright is dead and what he did after that to inform the police officers. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to continue the discussion in my next video.